Hi, Melissa Bill, and welcome to the Business Roundup, where we catch up with the movers and shakers in the business world. Today, joining me is Alaina Love. She is the CEO of Purpose Linked Consulting. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's delightful to be with you.
Now, before we kind of get started on a little bit about the book, I like to let each guest talk a little bit about their background, how they got started, and just how they got passionate about the field they're in. Do you mind starting off giving us a little bit about your background?
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I was used to being a high achiever, and that hadn't changed when I was coming up in my career working in the pharma industry. And I eventually became the executive director worldwide for a portion of the company where I had some 15,000 people around the globe in my area of responsibility. And I had an instance where my boss called me to his office to give me my performance appraisal for the year, and it was glowing. We had had a really challenging year. My team had performed really well, and my team also had achieved the top rating by our clients for the services that we provided. Now, that particular issue was important because this was the first year that any group was going to be rated by the clients it served. And the company being what the company was like at that time, they put teeth in that rating. So it meant the rating determined what the bonus pool would be for that particular department that year. And if the higher the rating, the larger the bonus pool and the more people in the organization you could reward who had done good work. And my boss was really excited because other parts of the function hadn't done as well in their ratings, and we had gotten the top ratings. So we kind of had saved the bonus pool that particular year. And he was very excited with me. And he leaned over the desk and looked at me and he said, Alaina, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you are in the succession plan to replace me when I leave this job. And he reported to the CEO of the company. And I sat back in my chair and I remember very little of that conversation. It was like having an out of body experience receiving that news. I learned later that I said all the right things, but at the time, if you'd asked me, what did you say in that conversation, I couldn't name it. But I remember going back to my office and sitting down and thinking about it and asking myself, why do you feel so uncomfortable with this news? Why aren't you ecstatic? Isn't this, of course, what you've been working for all of these years to achieve this level? I mean, you'll be the head of this function in a multinational, multi-billion dollar company. This is good news. And all I could hear in my head was, oh my gosh, I don't want that job. I don't want that job. And then the voice of quote unquote reason was saying, of course you do. You absolutely want this job. Do you have any idea what you're going to be able to accomplish and how much power you're going to have to transform the function? And oh, by the way, you're going to make a lot of money. You want the job. So these two voices are warring with one another back and forth. And finally, the voice of reason convinces the voice of what I call truth inside me to slow down, pause, don't make a rash decision, give yourself some time. So I gave myself 18 months to decide what I was going to do with my life, and 18 months to examine why I was feeling the way I was feeling. And instead of examining it, I put my head down and I gave 300% of myself to the work like I always did. And 18 months later, I come sliding into home base with the dust flying, and I don't feel differently. All I understand at this point is that the sense of passion I feel for the work is waning, even though I'm doing a good job. And I didn't see where there was a deep purpose aligned with who I am connected to the work that I was doing. So I made the decision to resign, much to the dismay of my boss and others in the organization. And looked up about 2 weeks later and thought to myself, I wonder how that could have turned out differently, because I've just reduced my annual income by 100% overnight. And interestingly, I began to look out and to see whether or not there were any tools out there that could have helped me navigate that decision more smoothly than I did, and found that there weren't any. So the work that I do now is really the product of that. It's the product of that quest for myself, for wanting to understand what my passions were, for wanting to feel a deeper sense of purpose in my work and in my life. And I began the research that would allow me to make that work a reality and available to everyone.
What are some of the ways you help leaders and teams to be more effective?
Melissa, is when I started doing research around this, I found that there were at least three distinct career phases that people experienced. I called them exploring, awakening, and expression. In the exploring phase, which we all experience, most of the experience is one where we're new in an organization, we're new in a role, maybe we're even new in the workforce. Maybe we've just graduated from a program or a school and we're starting our careers. And it's usually at that time that we begin looking around to see what's expected of us. How can I be successful in this organization? What are the rules of the road, so to speak? And usually at that time, people would tell me stories about identifying some job they thought they wanted in the future, some coveted role. I want to be the VP of marketing. I want to be in charge of sales. I want to be in charge of research. I want to be head of the company. They would identify something at that time. Then they moved into a phase that I called awakening. And in the awakening phase, most of the people described to me this feeling of having done some good work. They could look behind them and realize, I've done some pretty good things in this organization. And they would look forward and realize I still have a fair amount of career runway ahead of me. But it was a time in their careers where they had proven themselves to the organization and they had proven themselves to themselves. Imposter syndrome was less a thing for them at that point in time. They would sort of think, I really am that good. I'm really pretty good at what I do. And it was at that time that most of them would say to me, you know, that coveted job that I thought I was pursuing earlier in my career, it's beginning to lose its luster. I'm not sure that's where I want to go. In fact, I'm not even sure this organization is the one I should be part of, or even this industry is for me. I mean, I'm at a point in my career where I'm questioning everything. Interestingly, on average, people reached that phase of their career by the age of 32, which was pretty shocking. As an HR professional, I looked at it and thought, wow, if we're starting to lose people this early, there's something significant here to pay attention to. What are we missing? Why are we not doing a better job of connecting the essence of who a person is with what we're asking them to spend their most of their lives doing, right? We'll spend more than 85,000 hours of our life at work. So you have to be doing something that feels deeply purposeful and deeply connected to who you are. And then by the time people got to the awakening phase, they were really clear on their passions. They understood and had a sense of purpose. And if they had an opportunity to express those in the work that they were doing for the organization, they really leaned in. They gave the company a ton of discretionary effort and they thrived in their work. If they couldn't do that in their organizations, they made one of two choices. Either they left or they chose to stay and spend all of their discretionary effort on things outside of their work. So they did what they had to do to deliver on their goals and their responsibilities at work, but most of their real energy and real excitement came from things that they were doing outside of work that were deeply tied to who they are. So that kind of helped me understand how important this issue was for us to pay attention to, not just as HR leaders, but as leaders of any kind. If you're leading a team, if you have people reporting to you, understanding who they are, understanding their passions is absolutely crucial to getting the best results on the team, because you're going to get people who are excited about what they're doing. And I've had the good fortune of hiring thousands of people in my career, and the ones that were passionate, I never made a mistake on. I was always happy that they were part of my team.
Well, I was looking over your book, the book Permission to Be You, Discover Your Purpose and Passions to Bring Your Best Self to Everything. I loved the book so far. And I think it brings a lot of good points for just, not just business, but in your everyday life. Can you discuss some key takeaways from the book that you hope people get from it?
Yes. The book was just released last month, so September, and I'm very excited about it. It's called Permission to Be You. And the focus of the book is taking the work that I have done over the last 2 decades with leaders and their teams and translating that for everyone. So you don't have to be somebody who's working inside an organization that is able to hire top consultants to come in and work with you. You kind of have a travel companion with this book on your own learning journey as you want to design it. And the focus is in helping you understand your purpose and passions and your value system, and how all three contribute to the way you respond to pivotal moments in your life. Things like navigating a crisis, or finding a romantic partner, or navigating a career or a learning journey, or even how you respond to and manage loss or the death of somebody important to you. And so all of those pivotal moments that I chose to focus on in this particular book are the product of what I've seen with my clients over the years. The moments that most rattled people and most made it challenging for them, and most often brought them face to face with who they are. And the better they understood the answer to that question, the better they navigated those situations, be they positive or challenging. And then finally, one of the things I noticed as I was doing work with leaders and teams over the years is that sometimes you would get a person to the point where they deeply understood themselves. They had a sense of what their passions were. They could dictate to you a very articulate purpose statement for their lives, and they had a sense that their work was more than just an economic means to an end. It was an act of service, an adventure in service. And what they would tell me is that, I still feel stuck somehow. I'm still not moving forward as quickly as I thought I should be, or in the direction that I thought I should go. And what I would find very often was that there was some permission they needed to give themselves in order to take that first step. And naming and understanding that permission and granting it to yourself is often the only thing standing between you and the fulfillment that you desire. So these were things like, permission to fail, permission to be vulnerable, permission to play, permission to change your mind. There are in the book 10 permissions that I describe based on my experience with the clients that I've served. But you, Melissa, you might have 10 different ones, and a different person reading this book might have another 10 that's important to them. The focus is really figuring out what those permissions are that you need to give yourself, and it starts with permission to be who you are.
Why is it important to have your employees be more engaged? And what are some of the things that leaders can do to help foster that engagement?
Absolutely. And it really, I have to credit my clients for the idea of creating this book, because very often I would do this level of deep work with a leader, and the person would, pull me behind closed doors one day and say, "Hey, I would love it if you could do this for my husband or my wife, or if you could do this for my child who is at a major moment in their academic career where they have to make a choice about a major course of study that they want to pursue. Or my brother-in-law is really struggling in his job and he's not quite sure what to do. Could you do this work with him?" So often the clients were coming to me saying, this needs to be more broadly out in the world. There's more people that this work can help. And so that gave me the idea and the impetus to actually create a book that serves everyone. And I hope that it will. Well, it's interesting. The research shows that we change as we age in terms of our sense of happiness. I think we have this false belief that when we're very young, in our 20s and in our 30s, that's when we're the happiest. But it's interesting. The research shows that that's when we start sort of descending down the trough of a curve, and we get down to the bottom at around 40 and 50. Right? We're living life, but we're not ecstatic about it. And people think, well, that's because you've got kids and responsibilities and a mortgage to pay and a lot of pressure on you. So of course you're not as happy as you were when you were 18 years old. But interestingly, you start coming up out of that curve in your late 50s and in your 60s, and generally enjoy a sustained level of happiness and well-being thereafter. And what they have found through the research is that it's not really about, I don't have, the kids are graduated from school and they're off and they're married, and I don't have as many responsibilities as I used to have anymore. The difference is that as we age, what we tend to do is seek meaning. And the more meaning we find in the relationships that we share with others, in the work that we do in the world, the better we feel about our lives as a whole. So we do change, and we do need to find better solutions to understanding self and finding meaning through our experiences as we age. But my impression is that if we had that information sooner, maybe we wouldn't totally eliminate the trough of the curve, but maybe we'd smooth it out a lot and go into it and out of it a lot faster. So that's kind of been just an interesting piece of data that I've collected over the years as I've done this work, and it tracks with the research that we do in our organization. I didn't mention that part of my initial work was to try to name this thing called passion and try to name this thing called purpose. And I found it such a challenging thing to accomplish because purpose is like this big esoteric concept. Like how do you define it? How do you measure it? And I started to realize as I was working with really high potential people that while some of them could name what they were here to do in the world and others couldn't, every single one of them demonstrated particular passions in the way that they behaved. And I started to realize that those passions were the product of a deeper purpose in them. And even if they couldn't name that purpose, we could actually identify when those passions were being exhibited. And finally, through the research that I did, we could actually codify those passions. So I worked with a research team at the University of Michigan and created something called the Passion Profiler, which identifies 10 distinct passions that we all have in us to greater or lesser degrees and can measure which ones are the most important ones to you, which are your top three. Armed with that information, you have a better understanding of the strengths you're likely to enjoy because you have particular passions. You're also armed with information about the vulnerabilities you might be more subject to because you have certain passions. And most importantly, you'll have an understanding of the environments in which you're likely to thrive because you have particular passions. So that's sort of trying to take a concept that feels pretty esoteric and hard to understand and package it into something that we can actually do something with. I might not be able to tell you, hey, Melissa, this is your exact purpose statement for your life, but I can really help you get close to figuring out what that is by helping you understand the passions that that purpose within you produces. And what your top three are pretty much drives how you think about your life and how you think about your work in full and meaningful ways. Pretty exciting. Yes. Yeah, I talk about all 10 archetypes in the book. And I also offer readers a discount code with a QR code in the back of the book that will lead them online so that they can take one of what will be three versions of the Passion Profiler available to the readers of this book. The first one is a Passion Profiler for self-awareness, just to give them an idea of what their top three passions are and how those play a role in how they express themselves and how others view them, which is really important. We often don't understand how we're being viewed by other people. This gives us a deep, meaningful understanding of that. There's also the Passion Profiler for romantic relationships. That's part of the available tools with the book. And then finally, later this year, we will be introducing a Passion Profiler for students as well. So readers have the choice of those three that they can participate in as a result of using the QR code in the back of the book. Exactly. Exactly. I try to help people understand all the times that our passions are energy. It's an energy that others are perceiving from us and that we may not even realize we're putting off, we're putting out there in the world. So it's really important to understand what that is so that you have some control over perceptions about you and you can lean into the passions that are most important to you at any given moment in time. But the first step is understanding what they are. I can tell you with absolute certainty that when you take this instrument, when you take the Passion Profiler after having read this book, you will have deep affirmation about yourself and you'll start to understand, that's why I like this, or that's why this experience meant something to me, or that's why I reacted in this particular way in this circumstance. And it will make things a lot more clear to you about the choices you've made in the past and maybe even about the things you need to do in the future. So I can't wait to hear back from you once you do that. That'll be fun, a fun conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you being here and hope to have you come back in the future. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining the Business Roundup, where we always try to bring you interviews with some of the leading people in business, whether it be technology, finance, or energy. I hope you tune in. I hope you subscribe and listen, and we'll give you updates for new interviews that are coming up. Until next time, I'm Melissa Bill.